Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to LIBOR's Fair Housing in Your Blind Spot with a very, very, very special guest, Dr. Lee Davenport. I don't want to miss anything about her, so I need to read her intro, and then I'm going to turn it over to her. So we welcome all of you. Glad you're here with us, safe and sound after the storm yesterday. Armed with degrees in business and legal studies, Dr. Lee Davenport is an international real estate educator as well as a former RE/MAX managing broker and agent. She has been recognized in Inman News and numerous real estate organizations as one of the top 25 U.S. real estate coaches. Additionally, Dr. Lee's article features in trade and consumer reads like Realtor magazine. Remarkably, has doctoral research studying the lead generation success strategies of top agents, is published in the peer-reviewed Journal of Real Estate Education and Practice. In other words, she knows her stuff. She is affectionately known for helping workshop audiences say, aha, through their fun games and used to explain essential technology, everyday business tasks, and how our God-given personalities can directly influence our level of success. She is here on a very special topic to us, which is fair housing, and to talk about the blind spots that can cause destruction. So without further delay, we turn it over to Dr. Lee. Welcome.
Thank you, Marianne. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be with you today, particularly knowing that many of you did brave some treacherous weather yesterday. I'm in Atlanta, and so I was just watching and hoping all of you all would be well. So hopefully many of you have not really dealt with a lot of destruction to your property and so forth. But let's jump into today's webinar. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. I've been privileged for the last really 7 years that I've been on the education and training piece to have been doing classes on how to not get blocked, banned, fined, or even jailed, right? Based off of fair housing and other legal aspects when it comes to social media. So social media, some of you may have come in contact with me, but if you haven't, I am definitely a marketeer. I love helping agents develop lead generation strategies, including on how to do that with social media. So fair housing has been something that I've talked about a lot. And with all that's happening in the nation, with the protests and everything, some of you may have seen the article I wrote in Inman News. It was maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, which is why I was asked to join you guys. I wrote an article on There Goes the Neighborhood, the history of racism and the housing industry. And it's very different than what some of us may have ever heard about. There's a lot of things that have happened over the years that have mandated that we have fair housing. So today, let's look at just some of the history. I don't want to make this a boring history lesson, and I do like a lot of activities and games. So what we're going to do, and Marianne, I'm going to actually probably call on you more than I thought, because I forgot when I have this in full screen so that we can all see the presentation, it's harder for me to monitor the chat. So we've only got maybe 2 games, and Marianne's going to help me out with your responses, but we'll go through all of this. I've got my contact information on the screen. I'll mention it again at the end. I know it seems like we have a lot of time together today, but it goes by so quick, and I get that you may have questions afterwards, and I'm happy to entertain them. And I will ask, if you have any general questions beyond what I'm talking about, save them to the end. We're going to, again, cover some activities where I want your participation in the chat. All right, gang. What do you see on the screen? So this is our first moment to jump into the chat. What do you see? What is that image that you see? So let's give you guys maybe about 15 seconds or so, 15 to 30 seconds. And Marianne, this is where I'll need you to help me out. So if you can, in maybe about 10 more seconds, let me know what some of the responses are. And that way I can keep this in full screen so everybody can see the screen. All right, so any thoughts on what is on the screen? Whoops. Uh-oh, Marianne, did I lose you? Let me just take a look at, okay, so I see under, someone says 2 people. Yes, any other answers? Any other thoughts? So 2 people. Well, oh, go ahead.
Someone said a vase. It could be a vase of some kind. A lot of people are saying that candlesticks.
Very good. Very good. And thanks, Marianne. Thank you. So yes, you guys are nailing it. It is actually all of the above. So everything you have said is correct. If you look at the part that's in white of this image, that should look to you like a vase or maybe even a candlestick. But then if you look at the black silhouette, it should look like the faces of 2 men. So those of you that have said both, you're actually correct. Now, I'm pointing out something as we're getting into this discussion on blind spots. Notice that it's not so much what we look at, right? Because we're all looking at the exact same image. It's really about what do we see? So I have the quote here from Henry David Thoreau. The question is not what you look at, but what you see. And again, this is going to be very important into this full topic on blind spots and fair housing. But I bring this up because I call this a kaleidoscopic moment. Many of you may have children, grandchildren, or maybe you remember as a child looking through, the little kaleidoscope. And there was one image at the end of the kaleidoscope, but depending on the viewpoint, it could look very different. It's still one image, but the viewpoint made it look very different. And so here on our webinar today, I want to acknowledge that we all may have different viewpoints about all of these topics, and that is okay. This is a safe space. And again, throughout our time together, I'm going to have activities where I want you to participate, and I want you to be able to participate without fear, okay? So we're not here to criticize or condemn each other. We're just here to connect and to look at some of these principles. The last thing I want you to think about as we go through this is rattling your routines. And I have that on the screen on the right-hand side. What I would like you to do by the end of our time together is think about one thing in your routine that you're open to changing. And I'm going to give you some call to actions toward the end, but just think about it as we're going through this. Is there something in your routine that you could potentially change and ultimately help you be more in compliance with fair housing? So we'll look at all of those different things. All right. I love games. I think games are so vital. So we're going to play one of my favorites, Jeopardy. For those of you who may not have ever played Jeopardy before, I know it's been on for, 35 years or so, but not everyone's seen it. What happens is Alex Trebek, I guess I'll be Alexa Trebek, I don't know. He gives the answer and you guys respond with the question. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to give you the answer, and I'd like for you to type in the chat, what is the corresponding question that goes with this? Okay, so this is just a warm up. We're just getting our warm up in before we jump into the meat of this webinar. Let's start with the first answer. So the first answer is oppose construction of a wheelchair ramp. What is the question? So I'll let you guys respond. I'll give you maybe a few seconds, 10 more seconds or so. And Mary Ann, if you can let me know maybe just one or two of the questions that you might see that are popping up.
Sure. What is the fair housing violation?
Absolutely. And as I have on the screen, what is illegal? Yes. So fair housing violation, it's illegal. Absolutely. You guys got it. Let's do a couple more. We won't spend too much time on this because I know you are getting the point of it. What if we, as the answer, disapprove a rental to a person with mental illness who really doesn't pose a danger to others? What is that? What question goes with that? Again, I'll give you about 10 seconds. Type in the chat. Okay, Mary Ann, what are some of the responses?
Several, what is discrimination and what is illegal, all caps, what is violation of ADA?
Absolutely, yes to all of the above. Yes, that is against the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, and point blank, it is illegal. I'll do one more of these. Limiting families with children to a particular place or unit or building in a complex. What's that? Again, I'll give you guys just maybe 10 seconds or so. Okay, Mary Ann, what are some of our responses?
Several, again, are saying what is illegal and what's a violation of fair housing, protected classes, familial status, and so on. Yep.
You guys are nailing it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So it sounds like everyone that's responding has a pretty good handle on a lot of these fair housing issues, which means understanding our blind spots is even more important. And I'm going to talk about why in a moment, but let me just do a quick review for those of you that maybe some of the responses you heard, you didn't quite know why. Fair housing covers the big 7 that I have on the screen. So race, religion, familial status. And by the way, if you didn't know, familial status is our #1 violation as an industry. So some of us like to say, oh, I want to connect with empty nesters. And that's a no. That's a no, no, no. We don't do that, right? Or I want to connect with those that have large families because I want to sell large homes, and that's a no. Or divorcees, that's a no. Or the single ladies out there, or bachelors, no, no, no. So that's our #1 violation, and we really have to make sure we're paying attention because that's a blind spot for us. #4, sex, so gender, color, national origin, and handicap. These are the big 7 protected classes. And then I put down #8, including, depending on those of you, I mentioned already, I love social media. I love helping people to market their business. And the one benefit about social media is you can get in front of people who aren't in your immediate network, people that you might never come across. But the problem with social media, because that's almost a double-edged sword, is you may get in front of people you would never normally come across. And Perhaps you're connecting with people in other states, right? As they're relocating to your area. There are certain things that maybe not at the federal level are a protected class, but if you're a member of the National Association of Realtors, which I know you are, it is, such as gender identity. That's not protected yet under federal fair housing, but it is protected as a member of NAR. Also, military status, that's not a protected class in every state, but if you are marketing in other states, or maybe you have your license in other states. Some of us have licenses in multiple states. That means we need to be aware of that. So to help you out, I have on the screen under number 8, you see that link. So bit.ly/MESS free states. What that link takes you to is a map of the United States. And within every state, it tells you protected classes. So again, for those of you that have licenses in multiple states, or maybe you're working with relocators from other states, these are things we need to be aware of so that we can stay out of trouble. And the ultimate thing we do that will keep us safe, typically, and I have it on the screen, I have at the very top, it says describe the property and your resources, right? So we can talk about the fact that maybe we have an arsenal of divorce attorneys without saying, I only work with divorcees, right? We can say, I have the military relocation designation without asking people, have you served? Which again is an illegal statement in some states. So describing the property and our resources is a yes. But we never want to describe the people, meaning it's not our job to say this 5-bedroom house would be perfect for XYZ. That's not our role. So the moment we start to do things like that, no, we are in a danger zone. But like I said, today I want to get beyond, I feel like some of the things that I've just mentioned as review, we're just reviewing. These are some of the bigger and broader things that for most of us, this is on our radar. But again, there are things that are in our blind spot. So let's talk about it. I know not everyone drives in New York. I get it for whatever reason, but I will appeal to those of you that do drive or have driven before. Have you ever been in the position where you've almost hit someone? Or maybe you actually did hit someone because they were in this blind spot. Have you ever had that happen? I'm sure you have. You don't have to worry about answering in the chat. I know this is something that for many of us is very relatable. Even if it happened when you were a new driver, many of us have had that jarring experience where we're drifting over, we're changing lanes, and yet we hear a horn blast because someone or something is on that side that we did not see. And I want to draw your attention to oftentimes when we notice this blind spot, we notice that, hey, for some reason, I can't see. Maybe it's a panel in the car, but I can't see that well on this side. Most of us, we become more sensitive to looking in that area. Okay, so I'm going somewhere with this. But again, so the question I have on the screen, you don't have to type in the chat, but just think about it. How did your attention to the blind spot change after having an accident or almost having an accident? How did your attention change? Again, for most of us, we now are probably almost obsessing over that area because we know, okay, this is an area that I don't see that well in. Well, let me give you my own story, guys. Okay, so this fire hot red Camaro, I got a chance to drive. It's not my car. I got a chance to drive it. I have a friend whose younger sister was headed back. We're in Atlanta, headed from Atlanta to Michigan, which is where I'm from. She's from. And she was going to ride by herself in this fire hot red Camaro. And I said, hey, no, I'm off. I don't want you driving by yourself. Again, she's a lot younger. And I know some of you probably understand this, maybe even in your family, you have maybe a child that is in college and another child that's in diapers, right? So that's how she and her sister were. So we're decades apart. So anyway, she's a fairly new driver. I said, hey, I will go with you. She picks me up and throws me the keys. So I'm gonna drive our first leg back to Michigan. And before I get in the car, she warns me, she stops me. She's like, Lee, this car has a major blind spot on the passenger side. Now, for those of you that may have a Camaro, been in a Camaro, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And I even have on the screen a circle going around that back window so you can see it is hard to see out of. So I could have, the interesting thing was I could have gotten offended because like I said, she's decades younger than me, to the point where if I had been a different person, I might have said, who do you think you're talking to? I've been driving for as long as you've been alive. I know how to get in a car and check for blind spots, right? I could have taken that position. I didn't. When she said what she said, I immediately, when I got in the car, I looked over my right shoulder and I was like, how do people not get in accidents in a Camaro all the time? Because that panel back there, the image I have on the screen is not doing it justice, but it is hard to see. Like I almost, you almost want to stand out the sunroof because this blind spot in this car is huge. So anyway, I did not take a position of, you're attacking me. You're attacking my ability to drive. You're attacking the fact that I'm older than you, right? I could have. And honestly, I know it may sound like as I'm giving this example that's very far-fetched, but it's not. And I can see how if I had been a different person, I could have taken offense. So I have on the screen, I could have said, hey, are you calling me a bad driver? And again, I've been driving for almost as long as you've been alive. The nerve, I can obviously see a 2-ton vehicle next to me, but I really couldn't. So I could have taken a different stance. And here's the thing about blind spots. And I want to parallel this example I'm giving you again to fair housing, but I want to make it very relatable. So think about with just the example I've given you first, with blind spots, whether it's with a car or any other area of our life, first, there is an inferred threat to our identity. So again, just to bring it back to this car example, I could have personalized it and took it as, are you saying I can't drive? Now, a rational driver realizes the blind spot, again, doesn't attack you as a driver. It just means there's probably some object or some piece of the car that's going to obstruct your view. That's all it means. But when there's a threat to our identity, when we take it as an attack on who we are, then the next thing that happens on our timeline is there becomes a loss of curiosity. Notice I said as soon as I got in the car, I was curious, so I looked over my shoulder. But oftentimes if we feel that we are being under attack, when it's really just a blind spot, we lose curiosity. We stop asking questions. So we don't really reflect on what the person said because we kind of took it as, you're attacking me. Next, once we see it as an attack and we lose curiosity, the thing that is very obvious, like a 2-ton Mack truck being on this side, isn't as obvious to us anymore. And the interesting thing is, even though people from other perspectives and other viewpoints can see this blaringly large object like again, a Mack truck, depending on where I'm sitting in this vehicle, because of this obstruction, I'm just not going to be able to see it. It's not any reflection of my identity. There's a blind spot that anyone who gets in this car is subject to dealing with, right? So the obvious isn't obvious. And then of course, what unfortunately will happen is we almost get in an accident, or maybe we get into an accident. So we're driving on I-75. If you're familiar with I-75, from Atlanta to Detroit is a straight shot, but it is kind of treacherous. So there's a lot of trucks on an interstate. You guys know that. So on I-75, there's trucks whizzing by. You know, you're technically supposed to stay in the left lane, but when you're in a fire red Camaro, you're supposed to stay in the right lane, but in a fire red Camaro, I'm staying in the left lane because we're zooming on by. But ever so often, a truck will try to pass you from that right lane. And again, had she not brought my attention to that blind spot, I might have noticed it, but more likely than not, we probably would have almost been in an accident. So all that to say, the exact same way we might have a blind spot in driving, we can have it in other areas of our life. So I have here from the book, Liminal Thinking by Dave Gray. Some of you may have heard of subliminal, right? We think of things that we're not really aware or conscious of. And liminal thinking is that point right in the middle. So there's a consciousness and an unconsciousness, right? We talk about that with biases and so forth. But here, one of the points in the book that is very important to this topic is that our beliefs sometimes are tied to our identity. And when they're tied to our identity, it creates a blind spot. Again, before I jump into what this means for fair housing, let me just tie it back to this Camaro example. So if I had allowed her telling me there was a blind spot, if I allowed that to be tied to my identity, which would mean you think I can't drive, you think I'm a bad driver, then I've got to counter that, right? Most of us, right? We're not going to just lay back and get hit and be against the ropes. We're going to come out swinging, most of us. So I have on the screen the if-then statement. If I'm not a bad driver, so if I'm defending my identity, then the next line, then I don't have anything to change. So I just allowed this blind spot to take root and probably be something that causes a problem. Versus I could take what she said as, hey, if I have blind spots, then there are areas I can pay more attention to noticing. So if I have a blind spot, I can be objective, I can be empathetic, and then I can pay more attention, which means now I'm going to minimize those blind spots. So I know I've given a lot of time to this example because I just really want to drive this home before we get into the fair housing piece of this. So is it plausible for those of you that are drivers and you can admit that you have had blind spots that have potentially caused an accident or at least jarred you to the point where you thought you might have had an accident, but you didn't? Is it plausible to say that we have blind spots in other areas beyond driving? Yes, yes, and absolutely yes. So here in America, one of our blind spots as a country has been housing, fair housing in particular. And fair housing has been an outcry of America's blind spot. What was this blind spot? I'm gonna, like I said earlier, I don't want to make this a history lesson. I want to make this very actionable for you, but I do want to delve into the history just a little bit. So you guys know from pre-license classes that we've taken, even if for you, maybe that was 20 or 30 years ago, but you know, governmental restrictions and bank redlining have ignited and nationalized really the simmering embers of private prejudice and real estate steering. So things that were happening maybe at a very personal and private level, maybe only in certain communities because of redlining, as well as things that came from our federal government, it then became codified, federalized, and nationalized. So let's do another activity really quickly, guys. Okay. We're gonna play two truths and a lie. I'm gonna read three things, and out of the three things, I want you to identify which one is the lie. Just type it into the chat box. Don't type the entire sentence. Notice that each section here, I have headings. So the melting pot is one, public policy is another. So you'll just type in the heading. But let's do this really quickly. So I'm gonna read the left side of the screen, the three things on the left side of the screen, and you identify which one is the lie. Okay, so the first one, the melting pot. In the early 1930s, many urban neighborhoods in the US were populated by both white, which was largely immigrant, and Black working classes. Think about it. Is that true or false? Let me read the next two though. Public policy. President FDR's New Deal programs beginning in 1933 segregated some of these previously integrated urban neighborhoods. Think about that one. Is that true or false? And then the last of this three, concentrated poverty. Public housing began as a way to help the poor. So out of those three, which one is the lie? Just simply type in the heading, and I'll give you guys 10, 15 seconds to start identifying out of those three. So is it the melting pot, public policy, or concentrated poverty? Hey, Mary Ann, do you see any responses? Which one seems to be coming up the most, if you notice any?
Melting pot seems to be the one coming up.
Okay, good line of reasoning, guys. The one that is actually false is concentrated poverty. So the last one, which says public housing began as a way to help the poor, is not correct. Absolutely not. Again, I don't want to make this too much of a history lesson, but as some of you may know, have read about, I'm sure none of you are old enough to remember, but during the Great Depression, there was an influx, particularly in areas like you're in. I'm from Detroit area. So these areas where there was industry. So like in Michigan, you had Ford Motor Company. So all of these different places where there was industry, there was an influx of workers. And with this influx of workers meant, as we know, a housing shortage, right? You can't keep up with demand. So they started creating public housing actually for the working class. It was for the working class. You actually had to have a very good job. You had to do all of the things that we look at today when people are buying and selling real estate. So that is the one that is false on our screen. So that means though, and this is a little scary, the melting pot, that's true. Public policy, that's true. It's a little alarming. And again, these are just the reasons why fair housing came to be. Let's look at the second column and do two truths and a lie with this. And then we'll break away from our history lesson and get into what the blind spots are today. So first, I'll start off with unequal access. So think about, is this true or false? The FHA, yes, that FHA, the one that some of our clients, depending on who you work with, may be using for loans. The VA, yes, that same VA, began as institutions that would not insure mortgages for whites who live in an integrated or diverse neighborhood. Is that true or false? Think about it. The second one, covenants of color. The FHA and VA recommended private developers include deed restrictions that no properties would be sold, leased, rented, or occupied by any other than those of the Caucasian race. And then lastly, new legislation. The FHA stopped its discriminatory practices in 1868. Which of those three is the lie? I'll give you guys a few seconds to respond. So let's just take a few seconds. Unequal access, covenants of color, or new legislation. Okay, Mary Ann, what seems to be the most popular response as the lie?
New legislation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good job, guys. So the FHA, as many of you probably realize, wasn't even around in 1868, so it definitely didn't end. But again, the scary part is that means the other two, they are true. They are true. And again, I did that article for Inman a couple of weeks ago about how the fact that there goes the neighborhood and that sentiment really, as a result of some of the federal legislation and the institutions saying, hey, if you're white and you live in a neighborhood with someone of color, your property value is gone. We're not going to give you a loan if you want to move in. There were so many things that happened, and I've got several books that kind of identify these verifiable things that happened. You can understand why, unfortunately, our nation was in the shape that it was in. So again, with all of that being said, fair housing came out of all of this as a result, because you really had a lot of people who were working for good companies like Ford Motor Company and making a substantial income, but just did not have the same opportunities. That's our history, but I get it. Some of us are like, well, hey, what about today? The system I have on the screen has been discriminatory, absolutely. And I know many of us are wondering, am I part of the problem because I am part of the system that I did not create? And what I want to bring us back to is with our identity. If we make this an identity issue, then our threat mode turns on, right? If we make this, I'm a part of the problem, I am the problem, our threat mode turns on. And then we start to say things like, well, I didn't create the system. Why? Because our defenses are up. Our defense mechanism is up. And remember, just again, going back to the Camaro example, I could take her telling me this blind spot existed for just information, or I could take it as an attack on my identity. And so unfortunately, when we say things like, well, I didn't create the system, we're putting up a wall and saying, hey, this is an attack on my identity. Or we can say things like, I have children, or I have grandchildren, like in our Jeopardy game, when someone that maybe has a lot of children tries to accuse us of discriminating against them. And our default is, but I have children, I have grandchildren. Or I show properties that have ramps if someone that has a handicap feels like they have not been included. Or the next one, Chinese investors love me if someone accuses us of not working with other nationalities. Or I have a Muslim neighbor. Of course, I'm not discriminatory against them, right? So if someone says that we're discriminating based on religion, and we start to, instead of looking at our blind spots, we take a defense standpoint. Or my best friend is Black, I only see green, I'm not prejudiced, and of course, don't label me. These are all statements that for many of us, and like I said, I want this to be a safe space, and notice that this is not relegated to just racism or any one of the 7 protected classes. I really wanted to include all of them, which means all of us have an opportunity of having blind spots. And it's up to us to identify, will I make this an attack on me, or will I see this as an opportunity to improve? So I have on the screen identity attack versus area of improvement. So we can say things again to protect our identity and say, I'm not prejudiced. And the statement becomes, if fair housing is about being prejudiced, then I don't have anything to change. And that's dangerous. That means we have now just created a blind spot. Versus a more objective standpoint is, if I have blind spots when it comes to other people's viewpoints, then there are areas where I can pay more attention to others' perspectives. And we started today's webinar off with an image that all of us could look at, and some of us saw it as 2 faces, others saw it as candles, some saw it as a vase. Everybody was actually correct, but everyone had a different viewpoint. Just with that image alone, we have different viewpoints, and we know this, oh my gosh, in the summer of 2020, where we can't even as a nation agree on wearing a mask. And I don't want to make this political because I'm not going to side either way, but I just want you to understand how a lot of this, we're just going to see differently. We're going to see things differently. Others are going to have different viewpoints than we do. And that's valid. That's the key. It's valid. The bigger issue is, are we willing to pay more attention to other people's perspectives? That's what this ultimately comes down to. Let's play another game, guys. My favorite, Family Feud. I want to play a game here because I feel like this is getting a little heavy, and I don't, again, want anyone to be here and feel attacked, and I want everyone to feel safe. So let's play this game. You can share your responses in the chat, and we'll see what answers come up. So with this game, I want to jump into what are some of our blind spots with fair housing. Top 5 answers are on the board. Normally I separate us into teams, but I won't do any of that since this is more webinar style. But you can just type into the chat, what are some of the things that you think are our blind spots based on the discussion I've had so far? What are our blind spots when it comes to fair housing? Let me give you guys a few moments to respond. So type whatever you think into the chat. Again, it's a safe space. We're all friends here. We're all fellow realtors. And again, I'm so thankful to be here with you guys. So type in some responses, and then we'll just go through what the top 5 blind spots we have are. And as you're doing that, I do want to just mention again that I started this off that I want to rattle our routines. So as we start to walk through what these blind spots are, I want to challenge you to think about, again, what is something in maybe your routine that you can do differently? And I want to point out that of just the big 7 of federal fair housing, all of us can have blind spots, okay? All right, Mary Ann, are there any responses? Let's just start with one. If you see maybe something that's duplicated or.
Yes, we have race.
Okay, so I will say that is a good answer, but that is actually a protected class. So I want us to go beyond, so the protected classes, that's a given. But what are some of the things that are in that like subliminal piece that we might not readily recognize, which is what a blind spot would be. So any other answers, Mary Ann?
We have steering.
Okay, so I'll put that under if I were you, right? I want to explain each one of the 5 on the next screen, but we'll keep going. So that was a good one. Thank you. You get a point for anyone that put steering. You guys all get points. Another, Mary Ann.
Marital status.
So that's a good one. That's another part of our protected classes. So that's more of the above the surface, right? That's more obvious since it's explicit. So let's go below the surface. Any others? And I'll reveal what these are. I won't belabor this too long.
Maybe income.
Okay. That actually, the interesting thing about our industry, and I do want to speak to this, guys, income is something that we absolutely, you guys know this, we have to be able to qualify people, right? We have to know that you can actually afford if you're buying the home or renting a property that you can afford it. But the issue comes in with fair housing if we say your source of income is not acceptable. So we have to really qualify people based on income, but we can't do it based on the source as long as it's not illegal. If it's illegal, that's a whole nother story, right? But if they're saying, hey, I have SSI or some type of housing choice voucher, we don't have the right to say no. So good point. Let me give you guys some more of these. And I know some of you guys probably said them, but just for the sake of time, I'll run through them really quick. So number 5, it's an option on XYZ marketing platform. I'll talk more about this, but you guys may remember, for those of you that have been using Facebook, particularly if you've been running ads and you ever use the lead generation option. Prior to last year, or I think it was 2018 actually, HUD sued Facebook, and I'm so thankful HUD went after the big dollars, Facebook, and not us, because they could have gone after our associations, they could have come after our firms, but they said, hey, real estate professionals are on Facebook saying, I want my ads to show only to women or only to people with new mothers, or right? So that's discriminatory. So because the platform allowed it, many of us, we did it because it was an option, not thinking, oh, wait a minute, just because it's an option on this site doesn't mean we should do it. We're going to talk more about that one because that's a big one. And that's one of the takeaways I want you to know is that it's 2020 now, but in 2030, if you're still in real estate, 2040, 2050, it doesn't matter what new platform is available for us to market on. We have to remember the laws of the land, okay? Number 4, this is how other agents do it. I know if you're a newer agent, this can be easy trap to fall into. This becomes a big blind spot, particularly for newer agents, because as a new agent, this industry can be overwhelming, right? You can feel like, oh my God, there's so many different ways to market your business, grow your business, reach clients. What do I do? Let me just follow the top agent, Sally Sells a Lot. Let's just do what Sally Sells a Lot does. And she may be doing the right thing, she may not. And unfortunately, we can't let other agents be our standard. Number 3, selective fact giving. This is a big blind spot for us. And unfortunately, even with the expose that Newsday did last year, this was something that came out. And again, it feels like I didn't intend to be discriminatory, right? But it looks that way. If we're giving some information to certain groups of people, other information to other groups of people, that's dangerous. And then the number 1 blind spot is that the client said this. This happens a lot with rental properties in particular, right? So maybe again, the client says, hey, I don't want anyone that is on Section 8 or housing choice vouchers. I don't want that. And I have on the screen here just a response to these blind spots. What do we do? So let's start with the one I ended on. This is what the client said. So on the left-hand side, clients are not always acquainted with the law. And that's where our value comes in. That's why they need us. As much as people are trying to act like we are extinct and they're trying to disrupt our industry, this is one of the very reasons, because if they don't do this every day, which many of them don't, they don't have time to keep up with these laws. So this is our job. This is what we're keeping our license for. You know, we're able to say, hey, I've done certain amount of hours on these different laws. I know this stuff. We know it better than they do. Even if you feel like you don't know it, we do know it better than them. So it's our duty to say, when a client says, hey, I don't want this or that, or say this or that, and we know it breaks the law, it's just an opportunity for us to educate. We can do it kindly, because again, a lot of times people don't know. They don't know. So it's our job to speak up. So make sure if a client ever brings something to you that is against the law, you speak up, you educate them kindly on how we have to treat this matter, okay? The second thing on that left-hand side, if I were you, this is one of those things, oh my gosh, and I know for those of you that may be parents, this is probably even more of a just default mechanism to you. There's a commercial, and I should have added it, it would have been funny. I think it was with Progressive Insurance, but they have a commercial where they're like, we don't want you turning into your parent. And, you know, you see a guy, he's helping this other guy back into a parking spot. And the guy walks up to him like, he didn't ask for your help. What are you doing? And that if I were you phrase it comes, I really do believe none of us mean this maliciously, right? I believe we are coming from this place of helping people, but the issue is, are we helping them in a way that can get us in trouble? Does this look like we're violating fair housing? And oftentimes it does. So if I were you and helping people making decisions based on our viewpoint rather than the facts is a very, very dangerous place to be. What I'm gonna do, guys, hold on, I am so sorry. I want to make sure that you guys don't have any questions as I'm going through this section. So let me stop right here, and Marianne, take a look. Any thoughts or questions? I'm gonna open it back up for questions, but I want to just kind of pause right here. With this being more of a webinar where I can't see your faces, I don't know, but normally this is the point where I start to feel a little tension from people, so I like to stop. So any thoughts or questions on what we've discussed so far? If you have general questions, please save those for the end. We'll get to those, but let's just pause for a moment. So Marianne, are there any questions popping up, or should I just keep on keeping?
I don't see anything. You know, I see some in the Q&A, some general questions. So when you're ready for those, you know, we can go to that. So you can keep on.
Keep on going. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Marianne. On the right-hand side, selective fact giving. This is another one where if we give certain pieces of information to one family, right, because they do have more children versus this other person who's single, it can again look like we're being discriminatory. So I want to encourage you guys, everything you do for one client, make it a system and do it for every single client. Every single client. I know that may feel a little not just redundant, but like it's an overkill, right? Like we're just giving out too much information, but that is so much better than, again, someone being able to verify that, hey, you didn't give me the same information you were giving them. I really don't think many of us do it maliciously. We really do see, hey, you've got this situation going on in your life, and I want to give you information to help you with it. But the issue is there may be someone else who has that same issue. Maybe they didn't bring it up. And if we give out the same information to everyone and let them decide what's relevant for them, what's not, we are in a much safer place than if we try to decipher for them. So make sure you systemize everything you're giving out to clients. And if you decide I want to start giving this out to one client, make sure you just now give it out to everyone. The next one, this is how other agents do it. I know many of us have probably said or heard, if Johnny jumped off the bridge, would you do it too? It's not an issue for those of us that have been in the industry for a while. I did already mention that as a newer agent, you're overwhelmed, you don't know what to do, but I want to encourage you right here and right now that our standard is not other agents. Our standard is always the law. So if there is ever a conflict in the law and what you see someone else is doing, go with the law. And if you want to be a friend, I believe in being a friend. I like safe spaces. I don't think that we have to now run to the commission and the real estate board and report someone. But I do think we have a duty to our fellow friends in the industry. If we see them doing something that maybe they're not even aware of, they're not conscious that they're doing wrong, let's talk about it with them. That's the type of person I am. I don't like to rat people out when I can give them an opportunity to make the correction. And then last thing on this slide, if a certain platform gives us the option to select or deselect any protected class, I want you to make sure you ignore that part of that program. That's going to be critical because, again, like I mentioned just with Facebook, they had to pay, I think it was $1 billion or maybe $2 billion, but it was $1 billion, at least $1 billion that they had to pay Now for them, because they have such deep pockets, it was only like a month of their income. So it was like no big deal. But again, HUD could have decided to come after our associations, after our firms, because we were the ones actually doing the violations. And I'm so thankful because I could see it being a huge financial strain on our industry. So instead of saying that was just on Facebook, we now have to transfer this mindset to every platform you're on, not just social media. You could even be using an MLS system. I've talked to people, I'm so privileged to be able to train throughout the nation and in other countries, but just in our own country, we have some MLSs that have very antiquated verbiage that can get us in trouble if the right person has a problem with it and they want to take it to HUD. So please, just because the platform gives it as an option doesn't mean we have to use it. I mentioned I want you guys to be able to rattle up your routines. So let's shake some things up. You don't have to try to do all of these things, but like I said, if you can walk away with just one thing that you're going to change in your business, I'm a happy camper. One thing, I've already mentioned this, but I want to reiterate it. Let's correct instead of just cringing, right? So if a client says, again, let me stick with the rental market. So if they say, hey, I don't want someone that's on Section 8 or has some type of voucher or SSI, then it's our job to inform them, educate them of the law, correct them, and then go a step beyond that. And let's take that scenario and use it as a teachable moment. So I have on the screen that you can use it as an anonymous teachable moment, right? We're not calling anybody out and using names, but we can use it on social media, in newsletters. We can use it in our marketing. It does two things. First, it educates those we're working with. Also, it gives them peace of mind that we are people of integrity who are following the law. We're not shysters. We're not just trying to get over on them. And that, again, gives people a sense of peace of mind, really. So that's one thing I would encourage if you've never tried that before. Use these teachable moments. Secondarily, stick with the facts. I've already mentioned this before, but I want to say again, it's the law, not other agents, not other platforms that are our standard. Our standard is the law. And if you feel like, you know what, I took pre-license eons ago, many moons ago, and maybe you're someone even that's been grandfathered in, right? So you don't have to necessarily take continuing education like some other agents. Whatever your situation may be, you can stay current on the law, whether or not you're taking classes. I would hope you take classes, but even if you can't, there are things that happen in between classes that I want you to be able to keep up with. So I have on the screen 4 of my favorite tech tools to help you stay current on legal changes. Like even what's happening right now in New York, in you guys' area, even though I'm in Georgia, I know all about everything that's happening because I'm getting alerts. So I use feed.ly, so that's on the screen right now, feed.ly, Google Alerts, mention.com, and I also like a site, I didn't put it on the screen, but I'll mention it. It's called answerthepublic.com, answerthepublic.com. All 4 of those sites will allow you to just type in keywords. You type in maybe the target market you work with or the demographics that you work with, not necessarily, well, you could even just type in fair housing into any one of these platforms and set up an alert where you get maybe a daily alert, weekly alert, whatever is comfortable for you to keep up with, but you can get alerts on all the changes that are being made. And you can even see, and what I like to see, partially because I'm a trainer, but I like to just be in the know of this stuff, are the cases that come up. What are people getting in trouble for? Like I mentioned earlier, familial status is our #1 violation. And I know that because I'm seeing all of the reports and citations being made. So these are things that you can see as well. I don't have any special tools. I'm giving you the very things that I like to use. The third thing I'd like to mention in order to rattle our routines is stay a creature of good habit. I've said this already, but I want to reiterate: what you do for one client, do for every single client, every single time. No if, no ands, no buts, no exceptions. If you do it for one, you do it for all. The more we remember that, the less blind spots will affect us. So for many of us, that may mean maybe we need better systems to be consistent. Some of you, your firms offer great CRMs that maybe you haven't quite started using. Now would be the opportunity so that you're sending out, whether it's by email, whether it's by text message, whether it's what you're posting on social media, whether it's what you're mailing to people. We need it to be consistently the same message to everyone every single time. So use your CRM. If you're not, I also have two other apps to help you on the screen. IFTTT. It stands for If This Then That. This is one of my favorite apps because, as well as Zapier or Zapier, I don't know, I think they call it Zapier. It's on the screen, but what both of these apps will do, they will connect with the systems you use already. For example, I use Gmail, I use Facebook apps. So what Zapier will do is anytime I get a lead on Facebook, instead of me manually having to go in and send that person a message, it will automatically send them a message through my Gmail, and it can be done in a way where, again, I've made a system out of this. So every message is the same to everyone, and no one can say I'm treating anyone differently. All right, gang. I feel like this has been so much. So I hope I haven't overwhelmed you, but I would love to hear any questions or thoughts or concerns that you have since we've gone through this. Thanks for having me. Marianne, I'll let you take over.
Okay. Let's see, we just have two. Somebody's asking, when I ask for a showing of a rental, the listing agent asks for a credit report and income verification before the showing. Is there a right way to do that?
So good question. I would really say this goes back to what I just said about anything we do for one, we do it every single time, okay? So if you're gonna make that a rule, and if that's something your seller's requiring, there's nothing wrong with that. But you've gotta make sure that every single person that applies for that property, they have to do it. There's no exceptions. And again, it wouldn't hurt if this is just included in your marketing. The more you can be transparent about this rule, the safer you and your client will be. I hope that helps.
I think so. Another question is, so if I want to specialize in move up seller or buyers, how can I do that legally?
Yes, that's one of my favorites. So with move up, anyone that's moving up, what we need to default to, or maybe they're downsizing, right? Especially with what's going on with the pandemic, either direction, moving up, downsizing, both of those phrases, believe it or not, thumbs up. We can talk about someone that needs to move up or downsize all day long. The issue comes in when we start to specify what it looks like to move up. So if we start to specify you're moving up because you're having twins, or your parents need to move in with you, or whatever, right? The moment we start to describe the people, which is what I mentioned a little bit earlier, that's when we get in trouble. So we can say move up. We can say downsize, because that does not touch on any protected class. The key is to not describe who that looks like. I know that can get a little tricky with your marketing, so I welcome more questions about that. Or again, I've got on the screen my contact information, so if you even want to shoot me emails about that, we can talk about it. Or even if you have examples of your marketing and you want me to take a look, I'm happy to do that as well.
So I have to come on screen to thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Now I know what they mean in the bio about the aha moment. And thank you for taking so much time to make the presentation so interactive and so interesting. And I know that this will not be the last time that our paths will cross. On behalf of the Long Island Board of Realtors and all our members, we want to thank you so much for this presentation. And you were gracious enough to allow us to record it. So it will be on our website for anyone who missed it. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee.
Thank you guys. You guys have been wonderful. And again, feel free. I've got my contact information there. I know a lot of this, it makes sense when we're talking, but then in practice, when you start moving, that's when the questions come up. So I'm available.
Absolutely. Stay well and stay safe.
Bye guys. Thanks again.
Okay.